So, starting off, we have the Indian aviation sector to talk about because in this Hindu article today, there are various challenges, there are various failures that have taken place in the aviation sector in the past year. And that is why we are going to look at, particularly when we talk about the status of Indian aviation sector, the various schemes, policies, and finally, we are going to look into the various issues pertaining to the same. Why? Because various experts actually tell that the Indian aviation sector is a sunrise sector. Now, guys, in Indian economy, there are so many sectors which are having high potential in the future. Sectors such as AI, food processing industries, and also right now, aviation itself possesses high amount of growth and potential in the future because there are simply so many airlines coming up, there are so many foreign investments coming up, and also when we look at the aviation sector as a whole, on the outset you can only talk about the flights and the passengers and the cargo. But when you go into the details of the same, we have so many equipments, we have so many manufacturing potential, we have so many spillover of foreign technology into the Indian one. So that is exactly why aviation sector as a whole can be highly crucial for the development of the future Indian economy when we are aspiring to be a developed country by 2047. So let us have a very basic look into the status and how India ranks up when we talk about the global aviation sector. Now, globally, India is the third largest domestic market. We are just behind the US and China in the same. And when we talk about US and China and India, we have left behind countries even such as Brazil and even the rest of the European nations. When we talk about the major Indian airlines, we have Air India and we have Indigo. Indigo, when we talk about the same, we know in the recent times how crucial that particular Indian airlines is for our Indian entire economy perhaps. We will also look into the various specific features and the data regarding that. Now when I talk about that, Indian aviation sector is actually the third largest globally. What is the worth in money terms? That is $16.5 billion, which is also slated to increase to $26 billion by 2030. Also, by 2030, the number of airports which are totally operational, where these airports are usual ones, where the flights actually operate on a day-to-day basis, they will reach around 220 from around 160 airports right now. Also, there is a very curious fact, guys. We only had 74 airports in 2014. You can only understand how we almost try to double, more than double, the number of airports in just around 10 years. This is a tremendous achievement for the government of India when we talk about scaling Indian airports. Another progressive data is actually when we talk about the number of women pilots in the country. That is more than 3 times than the global average of 5%. We have 15% of the Indian pilots who are actually women. That is also a very progressive fact. Also, when we talk about the freight handle and the cargo, where we are talking about the goods, where we actually use the goods for local transportation, for exports, this is also increasing at around 8 to 10% every year. This means that as and when we have more and more demand from our own Indian customers and also from the foreign customers, we are increasingly using more and more flights, right? That is how we are actually trying to reduce the time by which Indian goods reach Indian markets and the foreign markets. Also, when we talk about the green airports, there are more than 80 plus airports in the country which have transitioned to renewable energies such as solar energy, wind energy, and various other forms of new and green energy. So the data tells a very interesting story that the Indian aviation sector has a huge potential, and that is exactly why the government of India also wants to bank on the same. Now firstly, when we talk about the three pillars which are actually driving Indian aviation, we have firstly the aspirational population of our country, that is you, me, everyone in the future would use more and more flights. Why, if you may ask? Remember the time, guys, that when we were young, the aviation fares or the flight fares were actually very high, right? Those times were actually the very first phases of our aviation industry. And that is why guys, that when we start any kind of business in the beginning, the costs are actually very high. And that is why during the period of 1990s, 2000s, when the aviation business was just new in the country, I mean, there were new players, domestic players coming up, in the private sector. Foreign companies are also coming in. So that was a very new phase, and that is why the flight fares were very expensive. But over a period of time, when we have a huge population in the country, and the population of the country is also increasing its own per capita income over a period of time. That means over a period of time, Indian population can increasingly afford the flights, and that is why there is a growing demand for the same. If you can look into the figures from 2014 itself till now, right, till 2026, there have been more than double increase of passengers, which means that people are right now affording the air travel. Also, when we talk about the new innovations which are taking place by various startups, and here Indian Airlines actually talk about various new technologies being included in their own businesses and their own companies, such as AI, robotics, renewable energy, clean energy. All of these are taking place right now. And finally, the government of India also has been taking so many pro-Indian aviation industry steps. Firstly, when we talk about the legal architecture or the laws in our country, they have to be very new. They have to go with the latest trends. Now, we recently updated the 1930s Act. We totally repealed it and replaced with the Indian Aviation Act. That is actually bringing us very close to the global latest practices. When we talk about the design, manufacture, maintenance, and all the other upgrades that are needed in the Indian aircrafts which are operating in the Indian airspace, in the Indian territory, the government of India is actually taking so many measures in improving this. Now, when we talk about the DGCA, which is the main regulator of the Indian aviation sector, also the Bureau of Civil Aviation, also the Aircraft Accidents Investigation Bureau, we are all talking about the defined roles of each of them so that their roles and various responsibilities do not overlap. So all of these things, when we talk about the new improvements and the regulators, this are improving the overall sentiment of the sector. Also, when we talk about the aircraft leasing concept in the country, one thing you have to understand, guys, that majority of the Indian aircraft that you see in the airports, they are not Indian owned. They are actually rented from abroad. Majority of those aircrafts come from the UK, Netherlands, and this amount of Western countries. And this is why we need to sign some international conventions to actually guarantee that the various aircraft that we are leasing, they follow some standards and rules. So firstly, we have signed on the Cape Town Convention for that. Also, at the Gift City in Gujarat, we are actually making this leasing business a serious thing. So we are trying to bring in more investments, and we are trying to set up physical offices so that the foreign companies, the foreign leasing companies can come to India itself, and they can actually operate more closely with the Indian airlines. Now guys, tell me one thing. We are leasing aircrafts internationally, right? But is it good for the long-term growth of our country? See guys, we are aspiring to have more airports. Right now we have more than, say, around 160, 162 airports. Over a period of time, you have seen that how new aircrafts are being ordered by Indian aircraft carriers such as Indigo, SpiceJet, Air India. So this means that the demand in this aviation sector is only going up. We also have the younger population in the country who are demanding more new flights. This means that the government of India sees a very good opportunity to manufacture aircrafts in India itself. We can actually attract the various global companies such as Boeing, right, Airbus, even give various funds and incentives to Indian companies such as Tata and startups in the country, so that we have more manufacturing potential in the country itself, so that we need not spend more dollars abroad. And this is exactly why we have to preserve our various amounts of expenditure internationally. We can also say in the near future, maybe export our own Indian manufactured aircrafts abroad. So this means that this can give us economic potential over a period of time. So this is exactly what the government of India also has announced in the last budget of 2025 and also this year's budget 2026. So many new incentives are given for that. Now coming back to the leasing part, because as of now we have to live in reality, guys. We have to focus on the MRO sector. This is nothing but the other official term of the leasing sector. This means that the aircraft that we have leased from international operators, we have to maintain them, we have to repair them. Maybe if there are some parts missing, we have to overhaul them. This means that maintenance, repair and overhaul is a very crucial component of the aviation sector. And that is exactly why In 2014, we had around 96 units, which focuses on generally these three things. Right now, we are aspiring to have more than 154. Right, the target is around reaching $4 billion worth of MRO by 2030. So on one hand, manufacturing, on another hand, we also have the MRO. So now, when we talk about the new advent of technology, you must have heard about DG Yatra. Whenever maybe you go to some airport, you see long lines, right, at the gate itself. Also, when we enter the gate, near the security gate, we have long queues. To skip that, we can use the DG Yatra right now, because the DG Yatra is actually having all the documents on a digital level of yours. For example, Aadhaar card, driver license, whatever documents you need to enter the airport to verify yourself, they have been uploaded digitally. You have to just go there, you have to scan your face and enter the airport. And this reduces a lot of time. Apart from the technological side, we are also focusing a lot on safety and efficiency. This is why we are actually focusing a lot on new investments on satellites, which can help us actually link the various international airports and the domestic airports in the country with the various evolving new threats and challenges. Right, we have just seen in 2025 a major aviation disaster took place. After that, we have had so many technical glitches. So we are trying to upgrade the towers, the various other infrastructure using latest technology. And at the end of the day, we are also talking about going green. We are talking about using sustainable aviation fuels, where we are trying to blend in ethanol and various other types of biofuels to make the emissions in the Indian aviation sector go down. And these are all the things that we are aspiring to do, the opportunities that we have. Now, actually, let us look at the various issues in 2025. So this is one picture that all of you are familiar with, right? In the month of December, we also have covered this in the previous analyst sessions, that the Indigo Airlines actually almost totally shut down, right? Due to the new flight regulations. In the comments, you can tell me what were those new flight regulations. The Indian airline of Indigo, they suffered the most. And this is the reason why we have to focus on a very, very big issue. Now, when we talk about the domestic market of Indian aviation, see, 64% almost is dominated by Indigo. Then Akasha Air and SpiceJet and others. This means that in India, we have kind of a duopoly. Duopoly means the rule of the very two big companies, Indigo and Air India right now. So, if we see that there are only very two big players, that means there is kind of a systemic risk. Even if one of the big players is affected, that means the overall Indian aviation sector will be affected, and that is why this kind of issues have taken place. Also, when we talk about that in India, there are so many flight routes, right? For example, if I go from Delhi to Mumbai or say internationally, so this is known as flight routes. Indigo has monopoly over 60% of the routes. So that means that in India, maybe 60% of the cities and the various towns which are connected via airports, Indigo operates on those routes. So when we talk about the flight fares, when we talk about the various other facilities, Indigo can actually itself dictate what can take place and what cannot. This means that this is a very, very major risk for the Indian aviation sector and also for the consumers at the end of the day. And this is why, for example, due to the disruptions which took place in December, the Delhi High Court recently asked Indigo to file affidavit on various refund and the compensations. This means also, if you are a kind of a duopoly or monopoly, you do not care about the passengers a lot, right? You can delay the compensation that you had to pay for the various technical issues that took place between these dates of December. And that is why, bringing in regulation and breaking down this duopoly and monopoly is very important for the regulators. For example, right now, India has around 14 pilots per aircraft. Globally, we have to have 18 to 20 pilots. That means the pilots need more rest. They are actually fulfilling the duty of responsibly carrying the passengers from one place to the another. And that is a very huge responsibility, guys. So they need more rest. But if they do not get rest, there can be various technical issues. There can be various human errors which can actually threaten the life of the passengers. And that is why, when these new regulations were brought in, this kind of chaos were seen. because Indigo only had around 14 pilots per aircraft. And on the other hand, you can tell me or you can suggest me that why not we are trying to hire more. We are actually having a lack of pilots in the country. In the last 4 years, the DGCA has only issued 5,700 licenses. We need 30,000 more in the coming years. And there are so many issues with reference to new pilots also. The training of pilots, the pilot training in itself, I know a very close person of mine who spent lakhs and lakhs of money and still could not become a pilot, because not only you need money, you need to clear various stages of the various kind of technical examinations, various technical skills, and at the end of the day, sometimes those skills and institutes are not available in India, so you have to go abroad. So these are the various barriers that our own pilots face. So mainly, if you understand, the pilots generally come from well-off families. So middle class families cannot sometimes even aspire to become pilot due to such high costs. The costs over a period of time are definitely coming down. In the future they will come down, but as of now this is the issue. Also, when we talk about the pilots, they have a cap of the maximum amount of time that they can fly. That means maximum of 60 hours in 7 days. But when we look into the global levels, always they are lower and better than the Indian standards. That means that, just like our conventional employees in Indian companies, our pilots are also overworked, right? Also, when we talk of another development, which is kind of a sad thing, we have in 2025, the government of India has approved several new airlines such as the Shank Air, Al Hind Air and the Fly Express, all operating from various parts of the country, catering to various different demands. For example, the Noida International Airport is coming up, and the Shank Air is kind of having a significant stake in that one for actually making the connectivity in UP much more better when we talk about the air connectivity. But when we talk about the various expenses that these new airlines have to spend for the aviation turbine fuel, just look at the prices here. Look at the various cities and the various comparisons that we see. The lowest is Mumbai. The highest aviation fuel prices are actually at Chennai, Kolkata, and even at Delhi, if you can understand. So, for a new aircraft carrier to come up and set up business in the country is very, very difficult. Particularly if you look into the past airlines such as Paramount, Kingfisher, Jet Airways, Deccan Airlines, right? All of these have shut down just because of simply high cost of maintenance and staying in business, right? Also, the tier 2, tier 3 cities sometimes do not see great demand. Even if the airports are coming up, the new airlines are coming up, the demand does not come up. Also, there is huge amount of cost competition. When we talk about the monopoly and the duopoly leaders there, Indigo, Air India, SpiceJet, all of these compete between themselves, and if some new carriers come up, what they will do? They will significantly decrease their fares so that these companies cannot fight when it comes to cost profitability. Now guys, we have just looked into the various issues of the sector. So what are the solutions? What are the way forward in this? Firstly, we should keep the mantra going forward. Infrastructural expansion is the mantra that the government of India is focusing on. Also in the recent budget, you have seen how we are focusing a lot on capital expenditure. So a majority of the capital expenditure should actually go into the airports. But in the recent budget, we are actually spending more on the road sector, right? But we kind of need to focus more on the aviation sector, because going forward, the aviation sector is only going to increase, and that is why expansion of the airports, spending on new technologies such as AI and various other air traffic control mechanisms will only make us go forward. Also, we have to bring the aviation turbine fuel under the GST. Currently, if you see, all of the different states have their own different prices because of the VAT which is imposed by the various state government. So these VAT, value added taxes, are those kind of taxes which are still not part of the GST, and petroleum is one of them. And this is why we have seen that how different states are actually charging different prices. So this means that investors, they would not like to go to those various states which high prices, right? Also, you need more amount of maintenance, repair and overall hubs. So as of now, we have to accept the reality that we have more aircrafts which are leased from international operators, and majority of those international operators, they file cases against the Indian airlines. Why? Because they cannot maintain properly, and that is why they have to pay a lot of fees and fines to those leasing companies, and that is why we need to target more than $4 billion industry by 2030. Also, when we talk about the sustainable aviation, this is only growing in future because more than 80 airports in India have the same. When we talk about the energy, because more than 80 plus Indian airports run on renewable energy, we are using more and more amount of sustainable aviation fuel. We are also talking about new age airlines which run hydrogen based planes, and at the end of the day we have to address the issues of the human resource. We need more skills, we need more pilots, we need more vacancies to be filled at the DGCA level, because at the regulator side also there are so many vacancies pending, and these actually mean that we have to hire more engineers, crew, ground crew, cargo operators, and so many other human resource. And this is exactly why, if you see, the government of India is also spending money on the same. Now, there is a mains PYQ to actually let you know how the questions are asked in here. For example, in this question, they're asking that right now we are building more and more airports via public-private partnership. And in fact, a recent airport also came up in Navi Mumbai, and many other airports are coming up via this model. This also can be one more way forward for you, that we need more private money, and sometimes the private sector cannot spend more money. That is why we need the public sector also, where they can give the funds, set up more new airports, and actually bringing more new investments. So these are all the things that government can do, and this is how the private sector and the government sector can actually work together. Now from your side, I want the answer to this PYQ in the comments below, and a practice question for all of you as usual. Now let us move on to the next one.